absolutely we know, as a matter of fact, that that has occurred, and I've documented that in various articles, and others have documented it also. But is it really that pervasive? Is it something where, every single UFO movie that comes out has been tampered with by the elite? And the answer is no. It's just not the case.
Yeah.
What we are having what we're seeing is a natural cultural process. But that's no less interesting, really. And ultimately, the effect on our perceptions is the same, regardless of who's tampering or how it's being tampered with or how it's being affected, whether it's natural or conspiratorial. Ultimately, these films have the same effect on our perceptions of the phenomenon, and they serve to confuse us, as I say, they serve to fictionalise the phenomenon through its association with spectacular entertainment, through fantastical entertainment, but at the same time, ironically, they actually serve to actualise the phenomenon as well, because Hollywood really does have this unique power over us. Film generally has this mystical power where it seems to actualise the imaginings of screenwriters and creatives, whether in Hollywood or Bollywood or Britain or any other film industry in the world. It takes ideas, and through their projection, through this very simple medium, ultimately, for me, cinema really is, and this is one of my main focuses in my work, I really do think that cinema is a uniquely powerful medium, and I think that even in today's world, of iPads and TV on demand, cinema really does remain this wondrous, and as I say, almost magical, mystical medium. And I think that it does remain so popular because what cinema offers to us that our PCs and our Macs and our tablet devices and even our TVs don't is this an expansive communal experience. It's this an opportunity really to gather in a public space with dozens, sometimes hundreds of other people, human beings, all of whom are essentially strangers to one another, but who for 90 minutes at least are united really on an emotional journey. And I think there is something undeniably special about that, about sitting in a darkened cinema and being able to hear a pin drop as the action unfolds around you. And in the work that I'm writing, I quote the late great British filmmaker Ken Russell, and he once said that Hollywood fills the gaps in our knowledge of the world, and I think that's absolutely true. And I think that also that's pretty scary for obvious reasons. We take our cues for reality from Hollywood.
Yeah.
It has this very strange effect on us, and I think that that's also incentive for us to pay much closer attention to precisely what it is that Hollywood is telling us, especially when it comes to a subject like UFOs, because we have to look at where we get our ideas from about UFOs and potential extraterrestrial life. Are scientists regularly holding conferences that are broadcast, well, no. I mean, they do hold conferences, obviously, but they're very insular, they're closed off, they're usually just aimed at an academic, strictly scientific audience, and occasionally there will be brief details of those meetings and conferences reported in the media. But essentially, we don't have access to that. We get our ideas about aliens and potential alien life from Hollywood. We get it from popular entertainment, from TV, sometimes from music, I guess, from comic books, but especially cinema, and especially Hollywood cinema. So if we were to, and again, it makes sense because UFOs are naturally cinematic. These sleek, unearthly objects. They perform remarkable aerial manoeuvres. They shimmer, they glow, they glide, and so. Although they're factual, although they're based in our lived historical reality, UFOs are also the stuff of great science fiction.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's like,
it's unsurprising that they've always sold very well at the box office. But what I find fascinating and why I think it's so important to be looking at this subject right now is because in the last 10 years we've seen this huge explosion in the popularity of the UFO subgenre. I've counted at least 40 UFO movies that meet my criteria of a UFO movie, and I'll go into that in a minute. They've been produced since the year 2000, and you've had the likes of Signs, War of the Worlds, Transformers trilogy, Indiana Jones, Crystal Skull, Monsters vs. Aliens, The Fourth Kind, Battle Los Angeles, Cowboys and Aliens, Super 8, Prometheus, to name but a few, as I say.
Yeah,
about 40.
Yeah.
Now, add to that TV series like The Event, Falling Skies, and you've got a new TV series coming out probably early next year called Area 51. And so it seems that, you know, audiences really stand very little chance now against this alien invasion of our popular culture.
I was just thinking that very expression, yeah.
Right, so, you know, most people might say, well, so what? Why should we care about UFO movies? You know, they're just entertainment, aren't they? Well, yes and no. UFO movies do matter, you know, especially if we consider the possibility that we may one day live in what Bryce Dable and Richard Dolan refer to as an after-disclosure world, or a post-disclosure world. Whatever form disclosure takes, you know, whatever these UFOs turn out to be, there is obviously something to hide, something is being hidden, and there is information to be released. Whether it, you know, and I think it's probably fair to say that at some point we will have more access to that information. Now, one of the first things people will want to know after disclosure, post-disclosure, is why these, let's for now, for argument's sake, call them extraterrestrials, why these ETs are here. To issue us with a warning, an ultimatum, like in The Day the Earth Stood Still, you know, to raise our cosmic awareness and to you know, welcome us into their galactic community, like in Spielberg's Close Encounters. You know, or are they here to, you know, to annihilate us and strip mine the Earth for its resources, like in Emmerich's Independence Day? You know, well, we'd also probably wonder what these beings look like.
The shining of kind of facing your own horror. I consider that an iPhone, the internet, we have to start treating them, you know, not as a literal thing, but pretty darn close to a psychedelic experience, that you are opening yourself up to everything. This is a sort of unfiltered approach to someone once described a psychedelic experience as load the universe into a cannon, aim it at your head, and fire. You know, this is kind of what an iPhone does. Is you can find just about anything, and you're gonna find the horrors in the world, and you're gonna find the beauty in the world. When you look at conspiracy, if you actually were to take a psychedelic and you were to look inside yourself, you're going to find those same things in there. So when Bill says you have to be careful approaching conspiracy, I think that's really important. But I would stress it's just as important when approaching any subject, because I see some people get lost on the love and light side. Some people get lost in the conspiracy side. And what I think synchronicity shows us is you're going to find these same things in everything. As above, so below, microcosm in the macrocosm, etc., whatever phraseology you want to use. But you're going to find this everywhere, and it's essentially an expression of yourself and an inward search. When you're looking at the world around you, when you're looking at the internet, you're also looking inside yourself. These are so interconnected as to be mirrors of each other. And if you don't get really balanced really quick, it's very, very easy to get lost in one of these things, in one of these headspaces. That could be a dark headspace or a light headspace. So I think if there's one thing that we can stress very much is to know what you're getting into, know what an experience this is, and to, you know, if whether you have some sort of meditative practice or whatever it might be to kind of ground yourself before you do it. We had this conversation about if you gave a 5-year-old child LSD, they would send you to jail. But this was around Christmas time. We did this show, and there were these stories about someone bought their kid an iPhone, and there were pictures of pornography already on the phone, and what a horror this was. And I'm thinking, you just handed that kid an iPhone. The pornography, yes, that's bad. And at the same time, what else did you just hand them? You just handed them the keys to this unfiltered reality of everything that people are spewing. And how at 5 years old are you prepared for that? And if you're only, this is a very American Western thing to get all your panties in a bunch over, oh, my kids saw someone naked. And again, it's not to trivialize that, but I guess my point is that that's the least of it. Yeah. You've just handed that child a psychedelic. Every person lining up at the Apple store when they put out a new iPhone, they're lining up for a drug. And if they're not consuming it as such, this to me is somewhat, on one level frightening to me, and another level, the small part of me that kind of, sympathizes with the merry pranksters kind of thinks, hey, maybe this is how it happens.
Well, I mean, you're right. You're so right. What we're drawn to will be an individual quest. What is there for us to find? That's what we're going to be drawn to and be interested. At the same time, it is that abyss, if you will, that we can't fall straight into. That we're looking into that abyss, basically. But the bigger question here is obviously, do we know what this is doing to us, both individually, but also as the human race? And the bigger questions comes up here. Are we ready for this? Do we know how it is changing us? And I don't want to make this to sound from the point of view that, let's go with CISPA and SOPA and all this and censor the internet, government style, because, there's too much, dark and awful stuff on the web. Certainly not. But at the same time, on a psychological level, are we ready for this drug, as you were talking about, Alan?
I hate to make this sound like just a psychedelic conversation, but that to me is the best metaphor for what we're doing. When we talk about an iPhone, when we talk about exploring synchronicity, when we talk about exploring conspiracy or any of these alternative topics, we are taking on new perspectives. And sometimes I wonder, the reason I made the kind of joke about, maybe this is okay, this is how it happens, that there's no way to prepare people. Just to say, when the first time I took LSD, I thought I knew, okay, I have a rough idea what I'm getting into here. No, I had no idea. And there's no way you could tell anyone what that was going to be like. And much the same way, the first few times you logged onto the internet, you have no idea what you're getting into. Conspiracy research, synchronicity research, these are, when Doug was mentioning the idea of old foundations falling away or ego deaths, this is what it is, because everything you know starts to have a question mark attached to it. Everything you've relied on disappears as you try out new perspectives, new perceptions. And this really is a shift in perception. And whether that means, whether we're going to associate that with 2012 or not, we're doing that not just once every time the Mayan calendar turns around. We're doing that every day we log onto the internet, or every day we walk into the supermarket and have a weird synchronicity with someone walking down the aisle, or whatever it might be. What synchronicity research seems to show me is that we're encountering this every day, every moment, and it's a really good training ground. But it's also, in the last few years, I've become a lot more cautious as to how I tell people. You know, I'm not selling this as a brand new religion. I've never wanted to do that. I'm not trying to sell this as, hey, this is going to bring tons of joy into your life. There is that, but yeah, you're going to have a dark night first. And, you know, when you step into that darkness, when you have to face your darkness, you know, there are, the dark night of the soul might be a necessary step towards, I hate to use the word enlightenment, but some, you know, whatever you might associate that with.
Right.
And nonetheless, the dragon that you face in this dark night of the soul, it has sharp teeth in it.
Well, you know, that's why I think that some of this, or the path that we are on, the human species, is things are going to happen to us nonetheless. I want to go back to the drug analogy that you made, Alan, again, because when in 2001 then, Kubrick, when the monkey goes from the human, if you will, this is an external source that comes in, but there's been speculations that this has been a drug, for example, in the past. This is what's unlocked the potential in our mind or spirit, however we want to look at that. And then we have this interesting connection. If we go back to the iPhone and the black stone and all that, Steve Jobs, of course, didn't invent the web. As we know, Al Gore did that, but with Apple, the forbidden fruit and the history that Steve Jobs has to LSD, he has certainly kind of put the web in our pockets, this constant connectivity. And this is something that I believe, then, as we kind of were talking about earlier, this is transforming our species, whether or not we want it. Maybe in the same way that we were transformed from, a monkey into a human, if we buy that, evolutionary step, but nonetheless, something happened in our past where we were in a state where we didn't remember, if you will, into where we now are, like, writing history, and things have changed. Civilization is fairly newcomers on the scene. But the question is the medium of the internet, if this is something that has come to us as a transformative agent. Alan, thoughts on this?
Absolutely. You made reference to the stoned ape theory, right? The idea that at some point psychedelic mushrooms awakened something in these early primates that, just sparked something in their minds. Going with that 2001 analogy, Jay Widener, I believe it was him who first said that, he noticed the monolith is the shape of the movie screen, right?
Yeah.
So here we have an association between, is it a drug or is it a piece of media? And what I'm kind of arguing is there's very little difference between media and psychedelic chemicals. One, you're actually ingesting a chemical substance, and one, you're ingesting this bombardment, this sensory bombardment of some sort of psychedelic dream, this projected dream. What we're doing with synchronicity is why a lot of synchro-mystic guys will play with pop culture, is because we can look at a piece of media and almost as like a shared dream or a shared synchronicity. We can all look at it, repeat it, play it over, and repeat certain aspects of that experience. But one of the reasons why, if we wanted to make this a truly scientific thing, media is not the most ideal thing. I don't know if there really is an ideal form of repeatable synchronicity, because it comes with the variable, just like LSD, just like Timothy Leary. If you read his, psychedelic experience handbook, him and Ralph Metzner and Richard Alpert have this book, and they're the ones who laid out this idea of set and setting. Well, to me, this plays in with synchronicity, because just as you can't control someone's LSD experience, even if you're the CIA and you want to push LSD into the community, you can't control what experiences people are going to have on it. Now, maybe as our science gets better, this is where, and we can go down this road if you want, where, government-sponsored legalized marijuana kind of scares me because I don't really want them manipulating those chemicals. At the same time, but just to say, even if the CIA is pushing LSD, they can't control what environment you're in when you take it, what your personal chemistry is, what your background is, and how you're going to respond. Just the same way that if there was a piece of propaganda that gets put out there, the person who made that propaganda can't control what your environment is, what your personal synchronicities are with that media, and so on. So there is definitely this correlation between sharing a dream, sharing media, sharing psychedelic substances. And this is why I'm stressing there are pros and cons to it. I agree with you that you don't want to we should be aware of what we're consuming when we're consuming media. It's interesting to me, Terence McKenna had this idea, if you read his Food of the Gods, he lays out these different drugs, and he lists television as a drug. He lists it under electronic drugs, and he says this is the most frightening of the synthetic drugs because it is a projected hallucination. There's nothing genuine about it. The person gets to give you whatever hallucination they want to give you. Well, what synchronicity shows me is that Terence McKenna, that's an incomplete or incorrect, or not completely correct, I should say, statement, because synchronicity comes in and the media is not a controlled substance either. It is not something that can be completely directed. Nonetheless, I definitely concede that it's much more directed than a lot of other psychedelic experiences.
off.